Hello, and welcome to Artpop Talk. I'm Bianca.
And I'm Gianna.
Gianna, what is up? How was your week? And more importantly, I need to know if you got your Spotify rewind, because that's the only important thing that happened this past week, really.
Oh my God. Yes, I feel exposed for sure. I'm just a bitch that loves pop music, and apparently the Jonas Brothers, because they were in my top 5. I do feel like that may be solely attributed to You Make Every Day Feel Like Christmas. I am so confused. I'm gonna need Spotify to let me know what their fiscal year is or that shit, because I remember...
What calendar year is Spotify running on, actually?
How does this work? How are you profiting off of me? What are you actually keeping track of when? Because I will never forget, because Jonas Brothers, their comeback album came back when we were in Europe, 2019. And when we were on the trains and shit in between country, I was listening to the Jonas Brothers, but not this summer. So I'm like, what the fuck is happening? I'm confused.
Gianna, okay, I have to say, first of all, I see you. I hear you. You're not a super bitch, because my Spotify rewind was the same thing. And I also had the Jonas Brothers at my 5th artist. And I looked at this, I was like, the fuck is up? Not that I don't like the Jonas Brothers, because the 2019 album Happiness Begins is so good. It's really great, but it was 2019 because I listened to it when I was in Florida before we went on our trip. And I'm not mad about it, but
I'm just confused.
But I'm very confused, because I don't feel like I know myself if the Jonas Brothers are in my top 5 artists, and I didn't even know that was even a fraction of a possibility. Where is my Mr. Harry Styles? Where is my Cardi B? Where is my Beyonce? I thought it was gonna be another lady, or it was gonna be Harry, and I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I mean, there's never been a year where Gaga hasn't been on my top. So for me, it was Gaga, Ari, Harry Styles. So I did have Harry Styles, because so I feel good about that. But I'm a little bit surprised Miley isn't on there, but I did get Anthony Ramos, and I'm not mad about that.
I'm very jealous. Anthony Ramos,
because
was in my top 5.
that album is what I listened to this summer. Thank you, TikTok, for introducing me to that album. Fantastic. Oh my God, that music video too, guys! If you have not watched that music video, what are you doing? It is a big fat mood. You will not be the same. Him and Jasmine.
Perfect angels from heaven, and I'm so envious of both of them, because both of them are just in love and perfect, and I love it. So mine, no surprise, was Gaga, Ari. Actually, not a surprise, but I've never had her on my top before. Taylor Swift. And
I did listen to...
I listened to Lover.
That was also last summer, right?
But I do continually listen to Lover a lot, because a lot of those songs from Lover are liked on my liked songs on Spotify. And Folklore, I listen to a lot. I really love Betty. I listen to that song a lot, and the song with Bon Iver, Exile. So I feel I don't know. I've never been a super Swiftie, but I have a lot of respect for the Lover and the Folklore album. So I'm not mad about it. I kind of wanted, I don't know. I feel I feel weird having 4 white ladies at the top of my list, and then the Jonas. I don't know why I feel weird about that. But
yeah, really 4 white ladies and 3 white men. All
yeah, right. I don't know. It makes me feel a little weird, but
I think there's a Jonas Brothers conspiracy theory going on, if I'm being honest.
There might be. But I will say Gaga, Ari, Miley, totally not predictable. Obviously, we knew Miley was my top artist of 2019, actually.
Oh,
Because Gaga didn't have a new album out in 2019, but obviously Chromatic. I was in the top 0.1% of all Gaga listeners.
Ooh.
So I should get like a gold star or something for that. I don't know, but
Did you watch Dash and Lily on Netflix?
I did watch it. Of course I did. What else?
Okay. I know. I actually liked it.
It was okay.
But I liked it better than the second Vanessa Hudgens Christmas movie. I was not a fan.
Switched again. Honestly, I was like,
was a letdown.
No, but it was good, except for, you know what I hate is fucking wedding scenes in movies and TV shows. Like the New Girl weddings make me mad all the time. Phoebe's wedding in Friends, just don't even get me started. And then this TV movie or whatever, Netflix Christmas movie. I love a good Netflix Christmas movie. I have no shame in curling up with my hot cocoa and watching Vanessa Hudgens act like a princess.
And I like the first one.
But can you stop getting married in these god-awful scenarios? Like, this bitch is in an airport. She's a fucking princess and she's getting married in an airport. I can't with the lighting and the like fake archway that they're under.
She's like, this is all I need. It's perfect. And I'm like, the fuck it is. You got married at an airport, bitch. Like, what? Okay, but my point. I had a point to all of this. It's not really a point. Just that I was like too excited in Dash and Lily when they go to Jonas Brothers Christmas concert. I was like, woo.
Every day feel like it's Christmas, except for it was New Year's. It was after Christmas when they're at the Jonas Brothers concert, but it's fine.
Interesting times. Whatever.
Interesting. Thank you, Spotify. Thank you, Spotify. That's all I need to say.
So we have some art news today about social media. Snapchat rolled out a new feature called Spotlight, which will be a dedicated space centered around highlighting the most entertaining snaps created by the Snapchat community. In order to get people using Spotlight specifically, Snapchat says that it will be offering users a share of $1 million each day throughout the remainder of 2020, with their payout seemingly determined by how popular their snaps are. Snapchat wants everyone to submit, and they have figured out their algorithm to where it doesn't matter if you're a celebrity, an influencer, or even a private account. The playing field in Spotlight space is equal for everyone. So why is Snapchat literally trying to pay people to use this app? Well, it's trying to compete with mostly TikTok, whose users have skyrocketed this year, and also all other social media apps who are now employing new video features like the Reel feature on Instagram. Guys, we did Snapchat dirty though, because let us not forget who had the original story highlight, and then once Instagram copied that feature, it was kind of like game over for them. I don't really use my Snapchat anymore unless I'm sending Bianca something that I think is funny and I know no one else is going to give a shit about. So,
yeah. No, I think that this is super interesting to think about visual culture across our social media because, I mean, TikTok really is something that over the course of the queue, I just find so wildly entertaining and creative. And I'm also kind of using it like Pinterest now also. The way I used to save things on Pinterest for different kinds of like creative projects and cooking. Like I am so excited about the platform of TikTok, but I guess, you know, everyone's TikTok obviously we know is different and there's like some wild shit on there. But when I saw that Instagram introduced Reels, I was like, fuck, Instagram is really trying to take over the world. And I will never forget when I first saw Instagram using this story feature. I was like, no one's going to use this. I was like, the story is specific to Snapchat. I was like, who in the hell is going to put 2 stories out, and it turns out I don't put anything on my Snapchat story really anymore. And I know a few people who do. My boyfriend and my best friend definitely utilize both a little bit, but I think I don't have enough friends on Snapchat anymore. So yeah, I think this is super interesting. And I was listening to a podcast where they talked about this story, and the idea behind TikTok's platform, I guess, is that the IP is not protected. So any different kind of app can easily copy this same kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Format. So I thought that was super interesting that TikTok has some, we've talked a little bit about this, some weird kind of behind the scenes rules where, your video isn't necessarily yours content.
Once you upload it.
Right. So this is really interesting that Snapchat is giving away this kind of prize. I just have a lot of questions. Like, are the winners actually going to get $1 million? And where is Snapchat getting the money? I mean,
you know what I think is also interesting? Again, I don't feel like a lot of content I put out in the world is particularly funny to anyone else but me or maybe Bianca. But even with this, like the playing field is even, I could win $1 million. I'm still not motivated to like do it just personally. But I think that's just because I don't use it anymore. But I think that's going to appeal to people who are still using it actively. But I don't know. For me, social media, I mean, I didn't have an Instagram till I graduated high school. I'm always really late to the game. I know some OG TikTok users, and I was also very afraid of TikTok when it first came out. I'm just like afraid of the internet in general. I've kind of talked about this before. Yeah, I don't know. And Bianca, same. I remember when Instagram put its feature out, I am like set in my ways. Like, I don't like change. Now my Instagram is updating all the time, and I'm like always so mad about it. And I'm honestly not a fan of the reels. I remember when that story highlight came out, and I was, for some reason, I was just pissed about it because I don't like change, and I like to keep things separate. But now I use my Instagram story all the time, and I don't use Snapchat.
Right. No, now I love Instagram stories. But what's kind of interesting to me about the aesthetic differences between all of these is when I see a TikTok and an Instagram reel, and I think also YouTube has a feature like this as well. They're called like shorts or something. Instagram's reels, like visually, it looks almost exactly like TikTok, which is so strange to me. I don't know. Because
interestingly enough, I've noticed just on my own feed on Instagram, the only accounts that I'm seeing actively use Reel are like companies that I follow, or like beauty brands,
celebrities,
and they're using it as more of like a marketing strategy. Just friends that I follow, I don't see anyone really accessing Reels yet.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe APT should submit a Snapchat spotlight, because I think APT could really use $1 million.
Yeah.
So, hey, little tartlets and strudels, if you think of a good idea, can you help us out and we'll split it with you? Maybe we should try. Maybe we should actually like take a hand in Snapchat spotlight.
You know, I'll do anything for the Artpop tarts, so that's what will motivate me in life.
I love it. All right. Well, we're going to take a teeny break, and when we come back, we are getting into a royally fun conversation. I'd say that's worthy enough to wear a crown. Hey friends, we've got a podcast for you to check out, the Fine Art Podcast. Each week on Fine Art Podcast, host and artist Keegan Shiner talks with a fine artist about their work, process, and life. He also invites a friend who is not a fine artist and has not even taken an art class to provide a friendly and curious, untrained eye to the conversation.
The show focuses on honest conversations with artists and has been described by artists as, quote, that studio visit thing Keegan is doing, and by non-artists as, quote, that podcast I was just on. New episodes each week. Follow Fine Art Pod on Instagram and listen to episodes on the website fineartpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Today's Artpop Talk is all about the British royals. We're going to look at some royal objects and historical sites, the portraiture of British royal figures, and then we're going to end with a discussion about Netflix's The Crown. So keeping in line with The Crown, today's royals are coming from the UK and Western European art historical canon. But of course, we want to acknowledge that their claims to power and possession of precious objects was at the detriment of many people, classes, and cultures. Surprise, surprise.
So, Gianna, what is your relationship with the royals in general? Have you been interested in these figures for a long time? Are you interested in them before you watched The Crown?
Yeah, really no. When I think, I'm just being honest, not really.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Not at all. When I think about royal figures and what I'm interested in, I actually think more about the history of the Romanov family.
Yes.
And yes, this might be because I love the horribly inaccurate animated movie Anastasia.
The Princess Anastasia.
Those songs are a bop. Let's just get that straight. But the part of Russian history, or that part of Russian history, is so tragic and a bit mysterious that I just am a little bit more intrigued by it. But when it comes to British royals, the reason I wanted to do an episode about them was because of their evident impact on pop culture and me realizing and understanding that as an adult. The royal family seems to hit every topic of interest, from politics and history to real-life fairy tale weddings, successful and tragic love stories, social entertainment, and even fashion.
And when you just mentioned the Anastasia movie, which is so good. Oh my God, it's so good. It just reminded me of the exhibition we saw a very long time ago, but it's one that I'll never really forget, is the exhibition. I think we saw it in Philly when we were kids, about Anastasia and her family, and I will never forget like the beautiful golden carriage in the exhibition space. And I actually have a little keepsake box that I still have today. It's on my bookshelf, and I got that at the Anastasia exhibition, and just things like that where you're kind of fascinated with one component of royalty and how that really transitions very well to something like an exhibition or museum space.
There are also a couple of really good shows that kind of tie into Russian history. The Great on Hulu about Catherine the Great is, again, not really accurate, very satirical, but I really enjoyed it. And then on Amazon Prime, I believe this year they came out with the show called like The Romanovs, and the first episode of that, each story is different. The first episode of that is really great.
Yeah, I loved that first episode. I'm also thinking about, Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette, and I just adore that movie. And when you mentioned The Great on Hulu, I think The Great and Marie Antoinette have that very kind of gaudy but fashionable and eccentric view of something like the royals, and I personally really love that. I love taking royalty with a grain of salt, but embellishing it in a weird and like fantastical way.
Yeah, to see what modern creatives have done with the history of Catherine the Great and also the Romanovs, it just really appeals to me. There's something about it that I like. But yeah. What about you, Bianca? With The Crown?
Yeah, I think I've always been interested in royalty, And I was kind of thinking about this from maybe a gendered perspective, and having grown up watching things like Disney princesses and being also very interested in history and aesthetics. It seems, I guess, natural for me to be intrigued by something like this. And I think, like I said, there's that over the top, fantastical, like glamorous life that seems very weirdly desirable. And I feel kind of strange about the conflicting components to that, because I still kind of have that princess fairy tale idea sometimes, but I guess I've never had a real contemporary attachment to the royals like we see today in the UK. And I think actually in high school I was in this marriage and family class, like cringe. Oh God, I'm so sorry. And I remember we watched Will and Kate's wedding in that class, and I guess, I mean, in hindsight, it was a marriage and family class, but I remember thinking how weird it was that we were watching, like someone else's wedding on TV. And so again, I've never felt that attachment to the British royal family, but I do feel a certain attachment to people that feel royal, like the celebrities we have in the States. And I know that in the States we don't have a royal family necessarily, so maybe that's why I feel more inclined to celebrity culture than I do someone like the royal. So I don't know, I have, like anything else, I guess I have conflicting thoughts.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some royal remnants. Why does royalty lend itself to museum objects and even museums themselves?
Yeah, so there are a number of estates associated with the royal family that tourists can visit. In general, looking up different places or mansions, they're either open only at selective times throughout the year, or some estates are open year-round for visiting, but only the parts of the buildings that aren't actually in use by the family are available to view.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Kensington Palace, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Kate and William, live there along with two other royal couples, but part of that palace, and they're actually referred to as apartments, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously no one can just walk into their actual home, but the rest of it
unless you're that man from the episode of The Crown who just walked into the palace.
Right, that was actually crazy.
That was cool.
But yeah, the rest of those estates function like any kind of museum would.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about the royalist of all royal objects, if you want to see the crown jewels, you can see them supervised under the gods. In the Jewel House at the Tower of London, these gems are a unique working collection of royal regalia and are still regularly used by the Queen for important national ceremonies. So if you visit and they're not on display, it means that they are in use by the Queen herself.
Oh, that's cool.
So on the Tower's website, it reads, quote, "Kings and queens of England have stored crowns, robes, and other items of their ceremonial regalia at the Tower of London for over 600 years. Since the 1600s, the coronation regalia itself, commonly known as the crown jewels, have been protected at the Tower." So over 3 million people have seen them in their present setting at the Tower. They are possibly the most visited objects in Britain and perhaps in the world, according to their website. The imperial state crown is usually worn by the monarch for the state opening of Parliament. When the next coronation comes around, key items will be taken to Westminster in readiness for the ceremony. It was also interesting to know that their most asked question by visitors upon seeing the crown is it real? ? I guess people literally can't believe they're looking at the real thing.
I guess I'm not super surprised by that question, because when I go to places, I guess when we started this episode, I was kind of thinking about my experience in going to places like the Louvre and Versailles, and how I adore those places. I think I kind of also find myself doing that. And I remember seeing, I think some of the crown jewels of France at the Louvre, and think like having that same kind of question, like, is this like when you look at something like that, like the crown jewels, or you're in a space like that feels completely otherworldly and so out of reach, I can't help but ask that question, is this real? Like, am I really looking at something that is worn by these figures of history, you know? And I guess I find myself doing that with any art object, I guess. Is this real? Is this real? And I think there's also kind of some conspiracy theory behind that too, because there's also that idea in the art world of fakes and dupes, and I don't think the British royal family is outside the realm of different conspiracy theories as well. So
yeah, and I do think that the crown and these objects, these regalia objects, are interesting because they're on display and they are historical objects, but at the same time they're still in use. So I do think that's really interesting. We haven't quite looked at objects like that so far.
Yeah.
So the next object I want to talk about is really just because I think it's so pretty, but it will tie into our next topic, I promise, so stay with me. It was one of Princess Margaret's favorite pieces to wear, the Poltimore tiara. It did not come out of the monarch's vault for Margaret's use, but rather belonged to the princess herself. Margaret was its second owner, and the first was Lady Poltimore, the wife of the second Baron Poltimore, treasurer to Queen Victoria's household from 1872 to 1874. Every inch is covered in diamonds. It's so sparkly. But it's very delicate and very ornate, and I really like the way that she wears it in this photograph we're going to talk about later. Like, she has this really big bun, and the tiara fits perfectly in it. It's, like, so satisfying.
I love it.
But this is the piece she wore on her wedding with then-husband Anthony Armstrong Jones. The exact whereabouts of the Poltimore tiara today are publicly unknown because after Margaret passed, in order to raise funds to cover exorbitant inheritance taxes, Margaret's children put the piece up for auction in 2006, along with around along with around 90 other jewels and many of her other personal possessions. So I thought that was super interesting.
Whoa, who has this tiara?
Okay, no,
who
dude,
is just sitting at home, wearing the tiara?
Like, excuse me. So the tiara sold for around a little over 900,000 pounds, which is a little bit over $1 million. There is a well-known image of her wearing this tiara that we are going to talk about in a bit, but I thought this was just such an interesting object to bring up because it is so iconic. I mean, she wore it on her wedding day, and most of us, including myself, probably or presumably might think that objects of this status are on display or in the possession of the royal family, but not all of them are, and many other objects are in the hands of collectors now. So I thought this was just really interesting when thinking of possession, since the royal family is still active and is still inheriting objects and collecting objects. Like, what objects are then coming out and put in collections? Because just thinking about the upkeep of it all, I don't know. I just thought that was something to point out.
No, this is super cool. I didn't know anything about this tiara. And yeah, I find it wildly interesting that the royal family, or I'm not sure how their estate works, but how come they weren't able to like purchase or take hold of it, particularly this object. So, Gianna, I kind of wanted to get into some portraiture, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
I just love portraiture, and I think it's one of my favorite genres, and it's a genre that lends itself so well to royalty, with propaganda, with tailored perception, with this idea of lasting legacy. And I think that portraits can make us think of these old world sitters as royalty, even if they're not, right? So kind of people of the court, or, you know, well-to-do people, or not even that, looking at that kind of perception, how people like myself today view something like this portraiture. So let's think about the history of this a little bit, coming from a Daily Art magazine article on power and propaganda. They write, quote, "In Western art, scholars believe portraiture begins with ancient Egyptian stylized profile portraits, continuing through the Greeks to Romans, so i.e. let's think about all those Roman busts and statues of emperors and such. Around the 1500s, the sitter starts to turn toward us, the viewer. Now we see more of their body, more of their clothes, their surroundings. Objects with symbolic meanings are often included, and we also begin to see more of their homes, their land, and their wealth." One of the earliest British royal portraits is of King Henry the VIII from 1505, who started the Tudor dynasty and brought a lot of wealth to England. And while his portrait is not necessarily the most lavish and decorated, his son and successor, King Henry the VIII, who you may know for his 6 wives and for executing 2 of them, has a very iconic portrait that lets us evaluate this idea of likeness, authenticity, and propaganda. So Gianna, I only just found out, for as long as I've seen this portrait, I mean, it comes up in every intro art history class, that while there are various copies of this image of Henry VIII, the original portrait, most likely from 1537 by Hans Holbein the Younger, was a mural that once decorated the Privy Chamber of Whitehall Palace in London. However, this first version of the iconic portrait was actually lost in a fire. And so what we have now are remaining versions of that original. So these were probably, some of them were done by Hans Holbein himself, and then kind of his workshop, the school of Holbein. Probably the most famous version of that original is now in the National Gallery in Rome, where we see Henry on this like very boxy panel, and he takes up almost the entire square space with a very blank blue background. And then we have this inscription that reads his year of age, 49, that surrounds, each side of Henry's face. When looking at an image like this, we can start to evaluate what's it doing as a royal portrait. Stylized images were the norm, presenting what the royal wanted us to see, which of course isn't unlike anything that we do today with our portraits, right? So we all have a stylized image of ourselves and others to present a certain idea that we have in mind that we want others to see. So this type of idealized and stylized presentation still very much resonates with us today. But what particularly makes this piece a unique, exemplary model of that stylization is that this portrait is shown without some of those common items that signal royalty. So we do not see a crown, a sword, or a scepter with Henry. Rather, what we see is this very majestic but more aggressive take on Henry through his posture, where he's standing very tall. He, like I said, he takes up a lot of physical space with his clothing. His hands are on his hips, and he's directly facing the viewer. He's looking right at you. His legs are spread apart, and his arms are at his side, which kind of symbolizes this warrior pose. In one hand, he holds a glove, while the other hand reaches toward an ornate dagger. Henry's clothes and surroundings, they're very decorated, but the background isn't, anything particularly royal in the portraits that exist today. I mean, it feels ornate, but not over the top. And the original painting most likely used gold leaf to highlight that opulence. So maybe that's kind of another visual indicator of wealth. The painting has frequently been described as a work of propaganda that was designed to enhance Henry's majesty and probably this divinity. We know from his history with his wives and his marriages that that aspect of divinity is super interesting, right? It deliberately skews Henry's figure to make him more imposing. So there have been comparisons of surviving sets of Henry's armor that show his legs were actually much shorter in reality than what we see in the painting. The painting also shows Henry very young, very full of health, when in reality he was in his 40s and had been badly injured earlier in the year in an accident. He was also, at this point already suffering from various other health problems that would affect the latter part of his life. Those other copies of the portrait that I mentioned were given to ambassadors, they were given to people of the court, public figures and such. And when you see an image like this, of course, that would seem intimidating as a viewer. It's clearly very imposing. And I just wanted to say, if you have ever watched Showtime's The Tudors, which I believe is still on Netflix, with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers and Natalie Dormer as Anne Boleyn. Oh my God, I love her as Anne Boleyn. You might have seen this painting, and Henry calls him Master Holbein. You see Hans Holbein a lot throughout the course of the show, which is just a fun little art history note if you are looking for something to watch.
Yeah, that was great, Bianca. Love a good little intro into portraiture.
Oh, for sure.
We've talked about photography quite a bit on the pod, but it's no surprise that the visual documentation of the growth and changing royal family and their effects on pop culture were impacted by the invention and the avid use of photography. So it brought new ways to record and celebrate our royals, as choreographed photographs were and still are heavily publicized to promote the Windsor family line and to show them having authority and longevity whilst placing them firmly in the modern age, as stated by Daily Art. Of course, there is a long evolution of traditional and contemporary portraits of Queen Elizabeth II, ranging from paintings to photographs. And we talked about the Andy Warhol print of her and his Queen series.
Yeah.
So I wanted to shift icons and talk about a couple of photographic images of Princess Margaret on her birthday, which were taken by her former husband and socialite, Anthony Armstrong Jones. You might be familiar with some of his images I'm going to talk about if you watched the show The Crown, as they reference her famous and at the time scandalous photos when her and Tony started their love affair. So the image of her 29th birthday in The Crown was inspired by two images of Princess Margaret, one for her 29th and the other for her 37th birthday. Both photos capture mostly her profile as she makes eye contact with the viewer and have a very intimate nature to them. The first one from her birthday, being scandalous, as it looks as if she's naked with only her jewelry on, as her straps are not visible. The second image, taken almost a decade later, captures the same likeness, this time exposing more of her back, and is set against a dark and empty backdrop and has dramatic shadows cast over half of her face. Both images are iconic and absolutely stunning. A couple of other photographic portraits of Margaret that I love, which is also referenced in the show, is a more formal image of her in her butterfly dress.
Oh, yes, yes.
I love that dress.
Oh, it's painful. It's truly painful when I think about that dress. My heart just wants it.
Really light pastels, really light tulle, I think, to it. It's so cute. And the other is referenced later on in the show when Helen Bonham Carter plays Margaret, and she is in the bathtub with her Poltimore tiara. This photo was taken out of context in the show as used to kind of dramatize the plot line. When originally the photo was taken by Tony in 1962, and the setting wasn't as lavish and like scandalous as it is in the show, and the image wasn't even released until after her death in 2006. And
oh, wow.
the photograph in real life shows a more intimate nature between Margaret and Tony, and you can actually see him in a little bit of the reflection of the mirror. And she's wearing her tiara, but she's just smiling. And in the show, they have Helen Bonham Carter covered in bubbles, and she's like posing, and it
Very
just seems
flirty.
like very flirty. And in real life, it's just a really beautiful and intimate photograph. So
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love these photographs of Margaret throughout her life. And I think I mean, obviously, I guess I'm interested in the fact that she married a photographer.
yeah.
And those images of her when she's younger that were seen as scandalous, I think they kind of, in a way, maybe remind me of the portrait of Madame X with the straps, and thinking about straps as being something that's scandalous, and then that makes me think about something like Kate and Meghan's wedding dresses. Like, what are the dresses going to look like, because they have to have sleeves and
Yeah, for sure. I think it was interesting through this kind of research to be able to pick up on little things in the show. That's really kind of a testament to the costume design and department of that series, which we'll get into in a little bit. But
cool. Well, should we take a little break?
I think so.
And then we can come back and talk more about Netflix's The Crown.
Welcome back, everybody. So, not that there are really any spoilers in our discussion of The Crown, because this is a historical genre, but we are going to talk about the most anticipated and latest season of The Crown that introduces us to Princess Diana. So if you want to wait to see that season for yourself, then join the discussion, go ahead and peace out, or forever hold your peace, because I want to know your thoughts on the series, Bianca, because I know you weren't that invested when we got to season 3, I believe.
Yes. So I did really enjoy seasons 1 and 2 of The Crown. I think probably season 1, I really enjoyed. I really liked Claire Foy. I think that time too, like the 50s and 60s, I enjoyed looking at all of the costumes, and it's an era of royalty that I wasn't super familiar with when thinking about Queen Elizabeth's life, I guess. But I mean, season 2 was fine. Like, it's very beautiful. It's a great cast. You know, obviously it's a very well made show. But when it got to season 3, this is no judgment on Olivia Colman coming in or the new cast coming in. I just found myself not being super invested in season 3, and so I watched like 1 or 2 episodes. Maybe the last one I watched was Aberfan with the landslide that took over the town. I think that may have been one of the last episodes of season 3 I watched. I didn't find myself caring about the story. I don't know why, but then when I saw season 4 was on Netflix, I guess I hadn't heard a ton of buzz about it, but when I started seeing things about, of course, Princess Diana, I went ahead and I watched season 4, and I have to say, I found myself really enjoying it. But as we'll get into, I think that has to do with Diana.
Overall, I do really like the show, and I have been invested in it. I'm generally on board with any kind of period piece or historical drama. I think the way The Crown is filmed and the setting is really impressive. The Crown uses a number of lavish and historical sites and estates all over England, although the inside of Buckingham Palace was for sure off limits.
What? They
the
didn't
show.
let him just like infiltrate the palace?
I know, right? What's up with that?
Netflix has enough money. Come on.
You never know with them, man. I don't know. Every time one of the seasons is about to premiere, there's always a pretty good interview with the director, Stephen Daldry. And when we all caught word of who the next cast was going to be to represent this next stage in the royal family's lives, Daldry said it was important to him to cast actors who coincided in age because he wanted that authenticity that comes with age and lived experience. So I thought that was interesting, and it definitely compelled me to keep watching. Bianca and I talked about it earlier, but I thought the transition from young actors to old actors was very clever. In the opening scene of season 3, the Queen, played by Olivia Colman, has to approve the new updated stamp with her profile on it. So in this opening scene, we are given a pretty good moment to process and believe that even though we had Claire Foy and she isn't here anymore, this is the Queen. And through a visual comparison of these two images of Claire Foy as the Queen and Olivia Colman as the Queen, we're given that moment. And I just thought that was clever. And, you know, I'm always down for a good visual comparison. So I think someone who's, you know, more astute to those things, I was like, I see what you did there. Like, I liked it. And I remember the director speaking about that in an interview, because we're living in an age where, I mean, thinking about This Is Us and the makeup and prosthetics that go into creating those storylines is so impressive. And it that would have been a viable option for the production of The Crown. So yeah, I don't know.
I think the concept of The Crown is super clever, and I think This Is Us, I think it works for them to keep the same crew and cast because it's not that they're in those kind of prosthetics every single episode, but with The Crown, I can't imagine every single scene, every single shot putting those actors through that, because it is such the length of a series like that is so much longer compared to something like a film. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right to analyze that moment of transition, though, and I think they do that really well through those visual components.
In the scene, the Queen is actually and verbally communicating with her staff about how, you know, she feels like she looks like an old bat, like in her words, and she just has to kind of move on and get over it, and age is rarely kind to anyone. So yeah, it was also a very kind of humanizing moment for her character
and
too.
I think something that resonates with women in Hollywood too, and women in general, I guess, but thinking about ageism and the status of celebrity in royal life. I mean, of course, elsewhere also, not to make ageism like exclusive to that type of environment, but thinking about public perception so much and how a portrait really instigates that questioning from your public.
So I also wanted to talk about the time we went to go see the traveling exhibition Costuming the Crown at Winterthur in Delaware. So that was last year, right, Bianca?
You know what? Wildly enough, it was last year. Last Christmas, we were in Delaware and we were able to see this amazing costume exhibition from the actual set of The Crown. Whenever you see something like that in person, I mean, I think it really makes a difference if you're able to. And I think it's also amazing that these pieces, you know, were put on display like that. I think it adds so much to the artistry of television and film and that cinematic experience, because I think those objects that you see on screen sometimes, you know, they feel so distant to us. And I think it also lends us to that question, is this real? Is this real? Like, do people really live like this? And then in the exhibition, you know, they had great kind of labels and didactics, and you see elements from the television show and then photographs and elements from these real life, I don't want to say costume, but real life garments that were worn. Mm-hmm. And it's truly incredible to see what something like the television show and what those creators on set and in the costume and makeup department are doing to truly replicate these objects. I mean, it's kind of like thinking about a fake versus a real painting, you know, thinking about like a fake Rembrandt or something like that, and how that exact artistry is replicated in something like textiles.
When we went, I also couldn't help but compare this exhibition to the costuming of Downton Abbey that we also saw a couple years before that. And in Downton Abbey, the creators of these costumes used real vintage fabric, which was so interesting because it made us look like we were looking at like 1920 like dresses, but in a way we were, because this was vintage fabric that was repurposed to make these costumes. And the crown, that was not the case, but looking at these almost like carbon copy replicas of these outfits, and also some of the regalia as well, super, super fascinating. But the way they take you through the seasons and the stories and the life of the character, the way the exhibition was curated was really interesting. And actually the Washington Post did an article about the exhibition, but also when it was out Winterthur. And so I'll link that for you all in the resources.
Yeah, awesome.
But without a doubt, Queen Elizabeth is an icon, and within pop culture we see this obsession with women of the royal family. In this obsession, we also see this continuous theme in the history of women overshadowing men through the public eye in regards to the royal family. And unfortunately, this has also led to irreversible trauma to the family as a whole, but again, in particular to the royal women. My own fascination with the family is also with the women, but I specifically wanted to talk about The Crown on the show because now that season 4 has come out, I found it really interesting to see this resurgence of sorts in pop culture. Airing this most anticipated season, many social media platforms and accounts are blowing up with Princess Diana content. And I'm curious what you thought about this season with Diana and all of the other content this season is influencing.
Yeah, I think outside of something like The Crown, there's this resurgence of 90s culture. I think that for kind of Gen Zers and millennials, we're able to rewatch things like Fresh Prince and Friends and all these kind of iconic like moments of the 90s, and we're at that point where 90s fashion is also coming back. And it was Hailey Bieber. I think a few years ago, Hailey Bieber was out, and I can't remember exactly what it was for, but she was sporting these kind of very iconic 90s Diana fashion sets with the biker shorts and sweatshirts. And that was a few years ago where Diana really had this comeback in our culture, especially here in the States. And I think for someone like you and I, Gianna, I mean, we know who she is, and there have been movies about her. I think, you know, Naomi Campbell played her in a movie, Naomi Watts played her in a movie. And
Naomi Campbell should
have her in a movie, though. Oh, she totally should. But I think that you and I are maybe a little bit more detached from her tragedy. So we know it's there, and I think it is a point of fascination, and there is that conspiracy theory behind her death. But thinking about her as a visual iconic symbol is really fascinating. And I myself find that I'm gravitating towards her. I'm gravitating towards her aesthetic, and like her beauty is just, and of course we know she was suffering from other things in her personal life, and so I do feel very strange about my pull towards her, and I want to make sure that, you know, I am thinking about her, I guess, in the right way, and
Well,
like making sure that her story is being told the way it needs to be. And I do think that the actress who played her really fought for that. I watched an interview with her on CBS, and I was I guess glad to see that. But she did say, of course, The Crown does take kind of fictional components to dramatize the show, you know, so you have to take some points of that with a grain of salt, I guess.
this conversation reminds me a lot of how we've talked about our obsession with Lady Gaga in general, how we love her so much, but part of her own trauma is part of Lady Gaga. And how do we appreciate Stephanie, but how do we also continue to celebrate Lady Gaga when that's also been part of her pain at the same time? And for Diana, I mean, she was once the most photographed person in the world. And that fascination of her and that obsession with her is still very much prevalent right now. But
And
how do
it's
we
just-
also
it's-
recognize part of her tragic incident was part of the paparazzi, and what happened to her was horrible. So we can still appreciate Diana and have this obsession with the person she was, but and also her icon as a person, and as a influencer of also fashion and politics. But how do we be
But
respectful?
kindness, like she just seemed, yeah, like very
Well, she
kind
was, and part of that
and
obsession
genuine.
is because she was a princess for the people, and she was giving us insight into a member of the royal family, and showing us emotion and human interaction that was never given before. And that was part of her what's the word I'm looking for?
Like her arc
that-
in this season.
Yeah, but that also is what led to her tension with the royal family as well. So,
Yeah.
but really interesting. And I think this is a good, like, history tends to repeat itself, and we see these kind of obsessions happening with other pop icons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the show's success, or what I find successful about the show, is that after every episode, I find myself like looking on Wikipedia about the storyline. And I also find myself like looking at images of Diana, and just me wanting to see more images of her. Like for some reason, I just want to see her. And I think I'm really interested to see, especially going into the next season, because another actress is actually coming in to play Diana. So the entire cast is going to change again. And we do get that 90s Diana. Like we are going to get that, and that black dress with the straps.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just interesting to see people kind of call for this moment. Like people want to see that on screen, and I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I think, you know, this whole episode is just a big, you know, glob of me being confused about everything.
Yeah. But it's
But
also...
I feel I want to see it, but is it okay that I want that? I don't know.
It's interesting. I mean, obviously, you could look on whatever platform and you can find an article about Princess Diana in relation to the crown right now. But Vogue did a good article on her in relationship to her grandma sweaters, as they refer to it, and how she appeared with so many grandma sweaters, and how iconic that was, and how influential that was. And it was this very niche topic in regards to Diana. And I thought it was just so interesting.
I think I'm definitely going to watch the next season. I'm excited for it.
Has the
And
cast been released yet?
You know, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Because
Juliana and I were talking about it.
mean,
Maybe it has.
The actress who's playing her now, like, the next person's gonna have some large shoes to fill.
You know
She did
what?
amazing.
I think she did do amazing. I think actually it has been announced, because Juliana said, once again, this actress apparently looks just like Diana.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for what they're going to do next. I know we didn't get into a lot about also how the royal family themselves think too much about the crown. Obviously, Queen Elizabeth, I mean, she doesn't even make comments on any of like the portraits done of her ever. So I don't think we're going to ever get a peep out of her. But yeah, I'm definitely interested for what's next to come. I'll really be interested in the new cast. Honestly, I wasn't aware that we were going to get that new cast for already.
Yes.
So I think that'll be super interesting. But if you haven't watched it, I think it is worth it. But you'll, like Bianca said, you'll find yourself kind of scrolling on your own phone looking for information and other visuals while you're looking at it. But we're always kind of into that. So, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. Gianna, thank you so much for all your insight. I am just so curious if anybody knows anything about the Poltimore tiara, like please hit me up. I just want to know where it is.
If you own the Poltimore tiara, please.
If you are sitting in your
know.
bathtub like Margaret wearing the tiara right now, hit us up. So, some quick housekeeping notes before we let you go. We will be back next week for our final episode of 2020.
Wow.
After next week, we are going to take a 2-week break for the holidays, and then we will return to you on January 5th.
Don't forget you can still purchase merch from our online store at artpoptalk.com. Any of our stickers or magnets are really good for the holidays, for gifts for your friends, also a gift for you. We will send those items out to you as soon as your order is placed. And with that, we will talk to you all on Tuesday.
Bye, everyone.